as Matt said, I'm Salman. I look after the EMEA team based out of at Sensor Tower. And what we're going to be covering today is a theme which is coming up quite a lot when we talk to our customers, which is how do we do well in the downturn? How do we win in the downturn? And I think it's an important question because for so long, we've never needed to ask this question. The mobile industry has mostly avoided any declines in revenue or changes in consumer spend. It's always been up and to the right. And so we're in fairly new territory here. So we'll cover three main use cases as to how certain brands have tried to adapt given changes. By changes, I mean a decline in consumer spend. TikTok, we'll look at how they've specifically started to push into new categories. Duolingo have done something which a lot of people wouldn't have thought imaginable and moved away from or focused less on subscriptions and going back to single in-app purchases, which, up until, the last time people focused on that was 2015. And then Strava have started to consolidate pricing and build communities and then reconsolidate. And those are separate strategies that we'll run through. The Duolingo one for me personally is the one that's probably most interesting, but I'll give you the broader context first. So for the first time ever, global iOS spending was flat. Whilst the app economy is always where the previous sort of economic downturns, things are now sort of coming home to roost here. And Android spending also fell for the first time ever. So iOS spending was up 1%, so we'll call that flat. And Android spending was down 7%. The decline has, to be fair, mostly come from gaming revenue. And Japan, and Japan, obviously, massive gaming market, is a big element of that 7%. But at the same time, the US and other leading markets have also seen a decrease. And so what we're starting to see now, and this is, I guess, the premise of today, is app publishers now are looking for new ways to tackle this change in consumer spending. And you've seen people like Tinder and Duolingo start moving away from subscriptions and really tackling the problem by doing single in-app purchases, which in the past obviously have been sidelined for ongoing revenue during the good days. So also just to give further context as sort of this nice little hurricane of bad news, we are seeing an increase in digital ad spend, but the majority of that spend isn't actually happening in the big social network platforms anymore, excluding TikTok. So Facebook's obviously seen a big decline in advertising revenue. The old news feed was far more profitable than the way Reels currently works. You may have seen, it was announced 2 days ago, they are now integrating paid search into their Instagram search fields as well. And also a lot of this spend is moving away from social media channels and into stuff like retail media networks, direct buys from, CPGs going directly to Amazon or going directly to, the source of the product sale rather than using intermediaries. So the key thing here just to point out is, TikTok is part of this growth, but a lot of the other ones like Snapchat, Meta, and Twitter actually have seen a big decline in their revenue streams. On top of that, what TikTok have done extremely well and have done for some time is they also monetize in-app. So purely on in-app purchases alone, ignoring all the money they make from advertising revenue, they made $500 million, $525 million just in December. But cumulatively, we can see they account for about 63% of all the in-app purchases that take place in social media apps. And it dwarfs everyone else. So we can sort of see in the corner there, it's 4 billion total over the last 14 months versus, LinkedIn, which is second and 10% of that total number. So TikTok is accounting for not only a lot of the revenue being driven into the company through advertising revenue, but also through in-app purchases, which is a nice diverse revenue stream. The majority of that is through coins. You purchase coins and you give them to influencers that you like. But, and this is the important part here, YouTube is catching up. So if we look at the big blue columns that are sort of getting bigger and bigger on the right-hand side there, YouTube accounted for 180 million, then 206 million, now about 266 million in in-app purchase revenue. So they are a threat. YouTube Shorts especially is helping the monetization play for YouTube on this. But TikTok are seeing a threat from the in-app purchase side as well from YouTube. And also, if we sort of look at in-app purchase, if we look at sort of advertising revenue as well in general, what you're going to see is that, if we look at in-app purchase revenues as well, generally they are plateauing for TikTok versus YouTube, where there is that cannibalization. So what TikTok have started to do is look at new areas to invest in. Obviously, they were always going to do this because obviously the target market and the demographic they have access to enables them to do this. But what we're seeing now is diversifying revenue streams into gaming, and obviously there's a big opportunity to go into sort of this Gen Z demographic and tackle the gaming market. But also, more importantly, I'm sure you guys have heard, but TikTok Music has now been trademarked across most of the US and Europe, and is likely to launch soon as well. And it's still not clear whether or not it'll be a standalone app or it'll be integrated in any way. But when TikTok Music also launches, it no longer just remains a social media app or an entertainment app. It's now diversifying into gaming, like Netflix has, but also music as well. So that's one example. The Duolingo example, I think, is a more achievable way of looking at sort of revenue growth because it's not TikTok. And so I think the key thing here, and actually this is my favorite slide, is looking at what Duolingo have done here over the last couple of years. So Duolingo in 2019 was about $65 million in terms of its in-app purchase revenue. And a cohort of its competitors, the same competitors, was about 104 million. Fast forward to 2022, they now have twice as much revenue that they generate on their own versus that same cohort. And this is the largest cohort of competitors. It's not sort of a hodgepodge of smaller ones. Their revenue is up 50% year on year. And it's the only language app and the only education app to see major growth in all markets. Now, this has been a very deliberate effort by Duolingo to sort of get to this stage, but the fact that they have twice as much revenue as all their competitors, I think is a big enough statement all on its own. Their subscription bookings are up, their user growth is up, and their revenues also climbed too. So what are they doing in a world when we're seeing people spending less on in-app subscriptions and in the mobile ecosystem in general? So what they're doing is they're combining category-leading gamification of their product with a flexible revenue strategy. Now, again, this would have been almost unheard of 2-3 years ago. If when we talked to our customers, somebody suggested let's go to single in-app purchases. We, as a business, probably would have said, hey, that's a really stupid idea. But it isn't, and it hasn't been. So it's probably worth running through this and explaining how they've done this. So the flexible pricing and also the gamification of the product. So a few things here. They've focused entirely on making the product sticky and accepting, I guess, currency in any format, effectively. And I'll kind of explain that in a bit more detail. But what I mean is they will take payment however a user is willing to contribute that. And that's a good thing. So subscriptions remain key for them. But Duolingo is now not just doing a subscription-only model. What they did as a business last year was say if they can make money from in-app purchases, single in-app purchases, one-time in-app purchases, they will. So now, 2022 versus 2021, their revenue from one-time in-app purchases was up from 3% of their total revenue to 5%. And whilst they're still focused on their power users, and they've built a lot of things for their power users, like Super Duolingo Plus, and they'll be adding Duolingo Max, which is powered by AI. And that also does stuff like personalized lessons, enhanced gamification. Effectively, what they've also started to do is target the casual user who they could never seemingly monetize through further gamification like Match Madness. That's the second screenshot there. And effectively, you've got a couple of seconds to match all the words. But the way they kind of create that repeatability and the way that they also focus on make sure people continue to use the apps and stay in this gamified process is using widgets. And that's a really fun tweet, which I think kind of sums up the way people are working, playing Duolingo, really. And playing is probably the right word rather than learning from Duolingo. The owl's face changes at different parts in the day depending on whether or not you've done your streak. So every time you open your phone, it's not the same static widget, but the owl's more and more pissed off. And it has been working in terms of getting streaks, but also the streaks, you can only maintain, if you fail at a streak, you lose the matching game. You can only keep your streak by buying hearts, which costs money, which is the in-app purchase model. It's working really, really, really fucking well. The other thing to point out here as well is for emerging markets, they've had a separate strategy, which is also working, which is rather than focus on language learning, it's focusing on making sure people who want to learn English can learn English with a certified Duolingo certificate. So again, monetizing that demographic where maybe an English course would cost, I don't know, let's say 2-3% of a monthly salary, and it's basically 0.1% of that. So that's also been a really clever way to not only get in front of customers, but also diversify the product to the demographic you're targeting. Those who are super users continue to get really great features and pay loads of money in the subscription. Those who never really were interested in paying are now being gamified and are being transacted through small one-time purchases, and then those in emerging markets are obviously getting custom material. And we can see the results in the data, right? So this is, again, also the reason why the Duolingo segment was my favorite segment is if we're looking at the number of people opening the Duolingo app more than 15 times a month, that's shot up over the last year even from 21% to 28%. So 28% of their users, nearly 3 in 10, are opening their app once every 2 days. So given that the route to ensuring that success is monetization, it's been a very clever strategy. Similarly, if we look at Duolingo's user churn, that's down at a record low as well. So it's worth pointing that whole product and monetization model has been working extremely well. And the final topic I want to cover is how Strava have used a specific strategy to continue to monetize well. We've talked about this for 3 years, but everyone downloaded health and fitness apps during the pandemic. No surprise, not very many people continue to use them. But there are a few key apps that have done well and have continued to be successful. The strategy isn't necessarily the same as Duolingo's because first of all, there's a whole broad range of health fitness apps, but also habitual behavior is a key part of why people would pay for a subscription, and it sort of models a real-life sort of gym subscription model. But generally what you can see here is from 2019 on the left side to 2022 on the right-hand side, Strava has continued to make more and more money in a noisier and noisier ecosystem. This is despite growth slowing down. So across the board, we are seeing health and fitness categories year on year, subcategories not doing quite so well. Meditation and sleep is impacted probably the most. That's down 14% year on year. Diet and nutrition is only growing very, very slightly at 3%. But what Strava have done is they've built a strategy that they rolled out in the pandemic and they've continued to maintain now. They have a one-time. They removed all in-app purchases, all tiers of subscription, and they only had one subscription. And so what that effectively did was it doesn't monetize you or push you into monetization throughout the entire life cycle until the point at which you resubscribe, but it has been supported by constant product updates. So what we saw them do was streamline the options to make it, look, this is 0 or 1. You either subscribe to this or you get nothing. We did see a big spike off the back of that, and that sort of orange line there is showing the revenues in Q3 2022 spiking. Similarly, because it's a yearly annual subscription, there was a spike again, but the key product feature updates come exactly 3 months before most people's renewal is due, right? So they did group challenges, and then what they did post the Q3 2020 subscription is actually then increased prices for everybody. So a lot of the marketing material that went, because they have such high retention and user loyalty, was before the potential churn period, which they see every August when they get that massive spike in spend, they actually announced that prices are going up from September. So again, it forced through that early renewal. But effectively what they've done is remove a lot of the noise around subscriptions and focus purely on key product feature updates, building a community, and making sure that they're cannibalizing as much as they can from their competitors. And this is another good example. They're losing downloads to apps like Komoot and all trails. So look at the arrows. I know they're quite hard to notice, but if they're going in from right to left, it means the total number of app downloads per year, new app downloads is declining. So effectively, Strava, Adidas Running, and Nike all have had a decrease in downloads in 2022. Komoot and all trails have seen an increase, so outdoor trail apps and outdoor mapping apps. Again, what Strava have done very, very well, as they've moved from sort of running to cycling to swimming to now outdoors, is they've acquired FatMap, which effectively will help them compete against all trails, which has also been one of the few apps, if we go back, that has been doing well. They haven't put it on here, but it is one of the apps that's also growing during this period too. So generally, what we're seeing here is despite the majority of apps that you'll see in your competitive cohort in the ecosystem seeing a fairly sizable decline in in-app revenues, there are apps that are doing a really, really good job in terms of monetizing. But it's almost casting away the old approach of just monetizing through subscription and subscription alone, or multiple tiers of subscription. We see people like TikTok who have obviously created a culture almost within Gen Z of one-time in-app purchases through the purchase of coins. That's helped feed apps like Duolingo to take advantage of that and monetize with record numbers. But then if we look at Strava that have an older demographic, just to go back, it's their average age of users 35. Because they know that cohort is like to have more money, they've just built one clean subscription, but they tie key product updates to the annual renewal cycle. So that's some of the key trends we're seeing. I think generally what we wanted to focus on today was not necessarily some of the positives in a stormy sort of environment, but focus on where and how people are winning. So hopefully it's been helpful, but I'm also happy to answer questions if you've got any once I step off stage. Cool, thank you.